Welcome everyone, hopefully again, to another episode of Mondays with Mundy, and that's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation. You're viewing this for the first time on July the 12th. Why July the 12th? Because 158 years ago, on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, probably the most famous battle in American military history took place just about 2 hours west of Philadelphia in a small little sleepy town called Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Adams County, right? So what's the story there? All right, in May of 1863, Robert E. Lee, the commander of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, had won his most famous battle at this point and decisive battle against the Union Army commanded by General Joseph Hooker at Chancellorsville, Virginia, in the first week of May of 1863. The Union Army was demoralized. Hooker lost his job. Lincoln fired him because it was pretty bad generalship, to be honest, even though some Union commanders did great on the battlefield itself. But Lee was on a roll, and Lee had not yet lost a battle, but he was about to, though he didn't know it at the time. So Lee has some other issues that he needs to worry about just besides military issues. It's the summer of 1863. Virginia, which is where most of the fighting took place, has just been decimated by the war so far. And Virginia was the breadbox of the Confederacy, and yet there was nothing left in the breadbox because Virginia was just being shot to pieces. It was even difficult for the troops to forage for food and things like that. Secondly, the Confederate government was hoping that if the Confederate Army could win a major battle on northern soil, which they tried to do in September of 1862. Remember, the Battle of Antietam. So they never made it into Pennsylvania, but this time, the government was hoping that if Lee and his army could win a major battle on northern soil, it would help turn northern politicians against the war itself, forcing the North to sue for peace, ending the war, and the Confederacy now becomes a sovereign nation. And that's the end of the United States. So there was a lot writing on this strategic move by Robert E. Lee to take the Army of Virginia into Pennsylvania. All right. So the Union Army at this point was trying to find the Confederate Army. General George Gordon Meade, Philadelphia native, only took command of the Army on June the 28th. And already he's developing plans for what will happen when he finds the Confederate Army. But for better or for worse, neither army wanted to fight that day, but they kind of ran into each other accidentally to the northwest of Gettysburg. And think of Gettysburg as a wagon wheel at the center of the spokes. So there were roads that went north and south, east and west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. It was the center of that area. So very strategic and important for the armies. So July 1st, the Confederates pretty much take the battlefield. The Union Army retreats into the town itself, and then south of the town, surrounding Culp's Hill, Cemetery Hill, and down Cemetery Ridge, which ran due south from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania itself. All right, July 2nd, Lee is going to attack Cemetery Hill because he wants to take the high ground, which obviously, defensively, he would want to do. And that fails, so it's July the 3rd. He's got one more attempt at smashing the Union Army. And the night of July the 2nd, General Meade held a council of war. And he predicted that Lee would attack the center of the Union line. And he was right, because that's exactly what Lee did on July the 3rd. We think of July the 3rd as the Battle of Pickett's Charge, all right? It's probably the most infamous infantry charge in the entire Civil War. Lee once is going to send 3 Confederate divisions, led by Generals Pickett, Trimble, and Pettigrew, against this part of the Union line, hoping to dislodge them and then capture Cemetery Hill, which gave him strategic and therefore artillery control of that whole area south of Gettysburg. Now, who was defending this part of the Union line? Well, it was something called the Philadelphia Brigade, and it was commanded by General Alexander Stewart Webb. The brigade was made up of 4 Philadelphia regiments, the 69th, the 71st, the 72nd, and the 106th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiments. Now Webb, much like Meade, had only just taken command of the brigade itself. Its previous commander, Joshua Owen, had been relieved of command for numerous reasons, and that's worth reading the story about itself. So here's Webb, brand new command, facing one of the greatest battles in American military history. And Webb came through, as did the Philadelphia Brigade itself. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the Confederate artillery, approximately 150 to 170 artillery pieces, start what was called the greatest cannon barrage in the history of American warfare. trying to kill, obviously, as many of the Union soldiers who defended that part of the Union line along Cemetery Ridge. But unfortunately, the Confederate shells had defective fuses, so they were either igniting before or after they were at their targets, or they were just simply aiming and shooting way over the heads of the Union Army itself, thereby causing very little damage, which means that when Pickett's charge actually took place, they were facing the Union Army in its full strength, basically. All right? So Pickett and Pettigrew and Trimble step off at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. They have to travel a 3/4 mile wide piece of land between their location on Seminary Ridge to the west, marching across the field towards the east and towards the Union line on Cemetery Ridge. Okay, all right. The two armies would collide eventually, all right, obviously. The Philadelphia Brigade was defending a low stone wall, right? And behind it was a copse of trees, though only about 10 feet tall. And in theory, that was the target for Pickett's charge, although modern military historians say, no, actually, they were looking further north to Cemetery Hill, but nonetheless. So the battle raged in hand-to-hand combat. Soldiers, and including generals, were dropping like flies, as the saying goes. Webb stood tall, slightly wounded. He commanded his brigade heroically. They fought heroically, by and large. I mean, there's always a few exceptions in any battle, but by and large, the Philadelphia Brigade stood their ground, repulsed this charge, and that today was known as the high water mark of the Confederacy. It is as far north, if you will, that the Confederate Army got into Union territory. So the Confederate Army retreats, the battle is over, and basically that is Lee's last chance to really shake Northern politicians in their belief that the war was going to end in the favor of the Confederacy. So, got all that? I hope you do. And again, Google it, you'll find a lot more information. So let's get back to the flag. All right, Civil War battlefields were noisy, smoky, chaotic, and let's pretend that you're George Gordon Meade, you're commanding the Union Army, and you want to get a message to Alexander Stewart Webb to tell him to move his brigade somewhere else in the battlefield. So how does that messenger find Webb on a battlefield with all of this smoke and noise and stuff going on? And keep in mind too that, you know, all the generals wore the same uniform, the same color, they had the same facial hair, they all wore the mustache, remember the goatees and the mustaches and things like that? Okay, Webb was no exception, all right? So there's no chance that a messenger is going to pick the right general in the right place at the right time to get this message. So the Army very early realized it needed to find a way of designating on the battlefield where these generals were located, hence headquarters designation flags. Because during a battle, the general is his headquarters himself. I mean, he has a tent and a desk way behind the line of battle itself, and that's fine, but that doesn't do you any good during the battle itself. So the general is his headquarters. So what we have over my left shoulder is the headquarters designation flag for Alexander Stewart Webb from the Battle of Gettysburg, July 3rd, 1863, Pickett's charge. So this flag was on that battlefield to witness one of the greatest military enterprises in American military history. So how do you know that it's Webb next to this flag and not somebody else? Well, here's the deal. So the Philadelphia Brigade was made up, as we said, of the 4 regiments, right? 69th, 71st, 72nd, 106th Pennsylvania. That was known as the 2nd Brigade. It was the 2nd Brigade of the 2nd Division of the 2nd Army Corps. So the way the Army organized its troops, you had a company of 100 soldiers, 10 companies made up a regiment, 4 regiments made up a brigade, 3 or 4 brigades made up a division, and then 3 to 4 divisions would make up a corps. So you went from 100 soldiers to 40, 50, 60,000 soldiers, all right? So in this case, the Philadelphia Brigade is the 2nd Brigade of the 2nd Division of the 2nd Army Corps. So let's look at the flag. So if you look on the far left, you'll see this red stripe. That designates the 2nd Brigade. Okay, and it runs up and down along the hoist, because that's where the flagpole would have been. Right? The blue field represents the 2nd Division, and the white trefoil, or shamrock, which is what most people think of it as, designates the 2nd Army Corps. So when you put those 3 things together in that color combination, it can only be Alexander Webb next to that flag, no other Union general at all. But to show you how the system worked though, if you take that red stripe away, it becomes the 1st Brigade of the 2nd Division of the 2nd Army Corps. And if you put 2 more red stripes on, it goes to the 3rd Brigade of the 2nd Division of the 2nd Army Corps. And if you change the blue field to a white field, it becomes the 1st Division. Change it from blue to red, it goes to 3rd Division. So you can see how the Army created this very ingenious, but very simple combination of colors, stripes, and then Army Corps insignia. And by the way, when Daniel Butterfield, who was a staff officer for General Philip Kearny early in the war, was creating Corps insignias, he specifically chose the shamrock, but trefoil, because the majority of the soldiers in the 2nd Corps were actually of Irish origin in some way, shape, or form, so hence the trefoil, okay? So I hope that all makes sense. Now, there are 2 really neat things about this flag. Now, this is wool bunting, all right, with some cotton in it, but primarily it's wool bunting, and you can see that we're missing about 20 inches of the fly, which is what the pointed end of the flag was called. But there are 2 little tags on this flag, which make it really interesting, so let's take a look at them. So right here, okay, this little tag sewn in says carried at Gettysburg, 1863. That's pretty good documentation, right? Then a little further down, on the hoist right here, is another tag sewn into, now this is actually linen along the hoist. It says Philadelphia Brigade, Gettysburg, 1863. So that's good documentation itself. But what also helped is that the conservator, when this flag was being conserved, as you can see, and it has been, they've confirmed that these are indeed authentic Civil War era materials. So, folks, this is it. So this is Webb's headquarters designation flag, July the 3rd, 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg, Pickett's charge. Great story. So I hope you've enjoyed it, as a matter of fact. But please do look at the research, and if you get the chance, go to Gettysburg. It is one of the most sacred landscapes in American history, and it is just breathtaking. Hire a battlefield guide, and you'll never have a better time in your life. But when you're out to Gettysburg, go into the Visitors Museum, because in there you'll see what you might want to call a diorama. That is, there's a scale model of the battlefield itself, with obviously little tiny soldiers, but done to scale and done to the landscape as well, the topography. And in this larger diorama, you will see Pickett's charge, July the 3rd, and among the Philadelphia Brigade soldiers, you will see a little tiny Union soldier carrying this very flag. So it's the real McCoy. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed that. I know you weren't expecting Civil War history. You weren't expecting a flag either, but I promise next time, no more flags. We'll stay off of flags for a while. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It's summertime, so I hope you all have a good summer. Stay cool, and hopefully we'll see you for the next episode in August. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.